I moved in with my boyfriend of a year 3 days ago. Prior to us moving in together, we went on our first holiday together for a week and moved in together 2 days after returning to the UK. All in all, I would say we've had a positive relationship. I went through quite a traumatic time as a child and young adult. Say, a bereavement, bullying, and I had my heart badly broken when I was 18 and couldn't date again for a few years afterward. I took time out, traveled some, and really focused on myself. Last year, I decided to take a go at dating again. I had a few duds, but didn't let it faze me much, and then I met my current boyfriend. It was like an instant pull. There was very clearly a connection there, and I was in disbelief. I had found someone I could see myself spending my life with. Roll forward a few months. It's Christmas. My boyfriend was unable to travel home to spend time with his family, so my family offered for him to join us. I was thrilled and very excited, but he didn't seem super keen and came anyway. On Christmas Eve, he got drunk and became rude to me. I took some space and left him to calm himself down. However, the next thing I knew, he was running out the front door. I went after him, drove to the train station, and up and down the main road trying to find him. The guy left his phone in the house, until I eventually found him a couple of streets away. He continued to run away from me and even began jumping through the gardens of nearby houses to get away from me. I was in complete shock as it appeared to me to come out of nowhere, like a switch had been flicked. Now, I should mention, my boyfriend served in the army for about 6 years as an infantry soldier. He has lost friends to combat, machinery accidents, and suicide. He's had a very tough time, and throughout the course of our relationship, I've tried to be patient and understanding of what he must go through daily. After he ran away from me on Christmas Eve, I went back home. I still had his phone, so I knew he wouldn't go far before coming back. He did come back and sat apologizing to my family, namely my mum, who was equally as shocked and upset by what had happened. He cried. We talked it out. I sat with him for the night and calmed him down. Christmas was a nice day. It was the first Christmas day since we lost my dad to cancer a couple of years ago that actually felt enjoyable despite what happened the night before. Roll forward a couple of months and everything was fine. We spoke about what had happened and, to my knowledge, moved past it. In the back of my mind, I was still hurt and feeling a bit embarrassed about his behavior in front of my family, but I loved him and was willing to work through it. Every now and then, he'd snap at me or be a bit blunt, but I usually let it roll off my back, and I believe we had a really lovely time. However, from then until about May, a couple of bad arguments brewed. He became very stressed at work and very unhappy with his living situation. He began to take his frustrations out on me, speaking down to me and in general, being very dismissive, rude, and just hurtful. I got to a point where I started snapping back and telling him not to speak to me like that, which he'd often apologize for, and we'd move on. Come June, my sister, her boyfriend, my boyfriend, and I were drinking and decided to go out into town. To do this, we had to catch a train and started heading up. On the way, my sister and her boyfriend changed their minds and decided to go home. The train was arriving, and I suggested to my boyfriend that he'd and I go out anyway, as we hadn't done it in a while. The train arrived, and I started to go down the stairs to board, but he started shouting and got in my face. In that moment, I completely shut down. I froze and didn't know what to do. He walked away, and I turned and ran the other direction. In that moment, something triggered me, and I couldn't deal with it and walked away. I knew his temperament, but I really trusted him, and in that moment, I felt as though a piece of my heart broke. The night escalated as I had gone silent, and he couldn't find me. Maybe it was immature on my part to just disappear, but in that moment, my anxiety was extremely heightened, and I felt as though I was in a fight or flight mode. He and my sister were trying to find me. I had switched my phone off and sat by the nearby river for about half an hour just trying to process what had happened. When I switched my phone back on, he was ringing me, so I answered. He started yelling at me down the phone when I answered about how silly I was and berating me. Luckily, my sister was there and snatched the phone off of him and told him to f off, which he did. My sister and I found each other and sat and spoke for a bit. She had his phone and was listening to some of my concerns I'd had about him recently. One of these concerns was a friend of his, a female friend that he had slept with just before he and I met and started dating. They'd been friends for years and one night slept together, but didn't continue as they lived in desperate counties and we're just mates. Initially, he hadn't told me this. He just told me that they were longtime friends and I was cool with it. I've never had a problem with opposite genders being friends. However, months into our relationship, he just dropped it into conversation one time that he'd slept with her. For him, it wasn't a big deal, but for me, my perspective changed as he was regularly talking to her and about her, and what I guessed to be my anxiety flared. I was uncomfortable, but didn't really want to talk to him about it. As it progressed, I kept seeing conversations between them becoming more inappropriate, talking about her figure, most namely her bum. Along with the fight at the train station and the development with his mate, I was in a position where I was quite unhappy. My sister and I were talking about it, and then my mum rang to say that our boyfriends were arguing outside our house and to come back home. What had apparently happened was that my boyfriend came home and tried to drive his bike drunk to come and find me, to which my sister's boyfriend argued with him not to, and it escalated. When I got home, he was sat on the sofa, almost sulking. I told him he could sleep on the sofa and that afterward I needed time to just process everything without speaking to him. At this point, I was very close to breaking up with him. I had reached a tether and was very angry and hurt. He seemed devastated, turned up with a letter and flowers, genuinely seemed so remorseful and hurting. Swore to stop drinking, even promised his mum he'd stop. I'm gullible, right? As if he'd stop. Fast forward a little to now, we have been talking about moving in for a little while, and the perfect property became available. We had to move in sooner than we both wanted, but as it was such a good opportunity, we decided to take it. I asked him a couple of times if this was 100% what he wanted, and if not, that was okay, and we could wait, given that things had been a bit tough lately. After we signed the joint tenancy, his demeanor completely shifted. He stopped being affectionate to me, and physical intimacy was essentially non-existent. At this time, I had been going through a very tough time at work, practically resigned, and was extremely stressed. Maybe because my focus was on my employment, I hadn't really acknowledged what was going on with him. I'm not sure. I didn't see him for a week, as we were both busy. Then we were due to fly to Portugal. The day before, he came over with his stuff to pack. Instantly, something wasn't quite right. He was snappy and short with me, didn't seem excited or remotely happy. I probably should have just cancelled there and then, but I was so desperate for a break, I think I was just oblivious. He wished to bring his open razor and fishing rod, which I advised him not to as we hadn't paid for extra baggage for the fishing rod, and that the airline doesn't allow open blades to be brought on in a carry-on. Oh my God, the argument from it was something absolutely ridiculous. He got mad because I always knew everything, and I always had to be right and have things my own way, etc., etc. I was just kind of a bit dumbfounded and didn't really know what to say and tried to just ignore it and calm the situation down. This energy just persisted on the holiday. He was negative, barely spoke to me, didn't want to touch me, or tell me he loved me. I ended up snapping. He told me that he didn't want a relationship, but didn't want to lose me. He then laid into how bad a person I was, and how badly I'd treated him, and that I'd never forgiven him about Christmas. I was kind of just in shock, and didn't really say anything. For a while, I've been asking him if he's okay, and what's been going on, but it's always just been shut down. Don't get me wrong, deep down, I knew something was wrong, and that our dynamic wasn't the same. Maybe I just didn't want to believe it. The rest of the holiday was okay. He'd improved a little and seemed to be feeling better. However, my anxiety was. The next day, I finally mustered the courage to leave the house. My mum picked me up, and we drove back to her place in silence. She didn't press me for details, knowing that I wasn't ready to talk yet. When we got home, I spent the rest of the day with my rabbits, who offered the only comfort I could find in the midst of my heartbreak. That night, as I lay in bed, my mind replayed every moment of the past year with my boyfriend. I thought about the good times, the laughter, and the love we shared, but the memories were tainted by the pain he caused. I couldn't ignore the red flags any longer. His behavior was unpredictable and hurtful, and I deserved better. He decided to reach out to a therapist. I knew that I needed help to process everything and to rebuild my self-esteem. I found a highly recommended therapist specializing in trauma and relationships. I scheduled an appointment for the following week and felt a small sense of relief that I was taking a step towards healing. In the meantime, I focused on getting through each day. My friends rallied around me, offering support and encouragement. They reminded me of my strength and resilience. Slowly, I started to believe them. I resumed activities I enjoyed, such as hiking and painting, and began to feel a glimmer of hope for the future. The day my boyfriend was supposed to return from his weekend away, I felt a mixture of anxiety and determination. I knew I needed to confront him and make a decision about our relationship. When he walked through the door, he looked surprised to see me there. "We need to talk," I said firmly. He sat down, looking weary and confused. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," I continued, "and I can't keep living like this. The way you've treated me is unacceptable. I deserve to be with someone who respects and values me." He opened his mouth to speak, but I held up my hand to stop him. "I've already made my decision. I'm ending this relationship. It's over." The words hung in the air, heavy and final. He looked stunned but didn't argue. Instead, he nodded slowly and said, "I understand. I think it's for the best." I felt a strange sense of relief wash over me. For the first time in months, I felt like I was in control of my life. We spent the next hour packing his belongings in silence. When he left, I closed the door behind him and felt a weight lift off my shoulders. Over the next few weeks, I threw myself into therapy and self-care. My therapist helped me process my trauma and build healthier boundaries. I began to see the patterns in my past relationships and learn to recognize the signs of toxicity. I started to feel stronger and more confident in myself. One evening, as I sat on my balcony watching the sunset, I felt a sense of peace that I hadn't experienced in a long time. I realized that I was going to be okay. I was rebuilding my life on my terms, and it felt empowering. Months passed, and I continued to grow and heal. I met new people, made new friends, and even started dating again. This time, I was more cautious and mindful of my needs and boundaries. I knew what I wanted and what I wouldn't tolerate. Looking back, I saw my relationship with my ex-boyfriend as a painful but necessary lesson. It taught me the importance of self-worth and the strength to walk away from something that no longer served me. I emerged from the experience stronger, wiser, and ready to embrace the future with open arms. One day, while hiking my favorite trail, I met someone new. He was kind, patient, and respectful. We took things slow, building a foundation of trust and understanding. For the first time, I felt truly seen and valued in a relationship. As we stood together, watching the sunset over the hills, I realized that I had found happiness within myself first. Everything else was just a beautiful addition to the life I had rebuilt, and for that, I was deeply grateful. As my new relationship blossomed, I found myself reflecting on how far I had come. My new partner, James, was everything my ex-boyfriend was not: patient, understanding, and genuinely kind. He knew about my past trauma and was incredibly supportive as I continued my healing journey. One evening, James and I sat by the fireplace in his cozy cabin. The crackling fire and the warmth of his presence made me feel safe and cherished. "You've been through so much," he said softly, holding my hand. "I'm so proud of how strong you are." His words touched me deeply. I leaned into him, feeling a surge of gratitude for the love and support he offered. "Thank you, James. I couldn't have come this far without the people who believed in me, including you." We spent the night talking about our hopes and dreams. For the first time, I allowed myself to envision a future filled with joy and possibilities. James shared his passion for travel, and we made plans to explore the world together, one adventure at a time. The following weeks were filled with excitement and new experiences. James and I went on weekend getaways, exploring nearby towns and discovering hidden gems. Each trip brought us closer, deepening our connection and building a foundation of trust and love. One day, while hiking in a beautiful national park, James surprised me with a picnic by a serene lake. As we enjoyed our meal, he pulled out a small box and handed it to me. My heart raced as I opened it to find a delicate necklace with a pendant shaped like a heart. "This is for you," he said, smiling warmly, "to remind you that you were loved and cherished always." Tears welled up in my eyes as I embraced him. "Thank you, James. This means so much to me." Our relationship continued to grow, and I found myself healing in ways I never thought possible. My therapy sessions were incredibly beneficial, helping me to understand and overcome my past traumas. I felt more confident and empowered each day, ready to face any challenges that came my way. One evening, as I was organizing my belongings, I came across an old journal. Curious, I opened it and began reading entries from the time when I was with my ex-boyfriend. The pages were filled with pain and confusion, a stark contrast to my current happiness. Reading those entries, I realized how much I had grown. I no longer felt the same hurt and anger. Instead, I felt a sense of closure and acceptance. My past was a part of me, but it didn't define me. I had the power to create my own future, one filled with love and happiness. Feeling inspired, I decided to write a letter to my ex-boyfriend. Not to send, but as a way to release any lingering emotions. In the letter, I thanked him for the lessons he had inadvertently taught me and wished him well on his journey. Writing it felt cathartic, like I was finally closing that chapter of my life. A few weeks later, James and I attended a friend's wedding. Surrounded by love and joy, I couldn't help but feel hopeful about our future. As we danced under the twinkling lights, James leaned in and whispered, "I see a lifetime of happiness with you." I smiled, feeling a warmth spread through my chest. "I see the same, James. I love you." As the months turned into years, James and I continued to build our life together. We traveled to exotic destinations, created beautiful memories, and supported each other through life's ups and downs. Our love grew stronger, rooted in mutual respect and understanding. One day, while hiking the same trail where we first met, James got down on one knee and proposed. Tears of joy streamed down my face as I said yes, knowing that I had found my forever partner. Our wedding was a celebration of love, surrounded by friends and family who had supported us on our journey. As I stood at the altar, looking into James' eyes, I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. My past had shaped me, but it didn't define me. I had found love, happiness, and a future filled with endless possibilities. Together, James and I embarked on a new adventure, ready to face whatever life had in store. And as we walked hand in hand into our future, I knew that I had finally found my home.